Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to Better Life discussion. I'm your host, Marcia Trajano, and with me is my good friend, Dr. Suzana Simões. If this is the first time you're watching this podcast like program, please do note that our program, Psychology and Spirituality Weekly Talks, are based on the works by Joanna de Angelis, and it is a program with the focus to offer a safe space for us to perhaps confront, compare, correlate, and expand on spirituality concepts from a psychological lens. Today, Suzana Simões will be sharing some thoughts around the evolution of human thoughts. So, very interesting. But before we start a conversation, Suzana, I would like to recognize the organization that is sponsoring this program, and they include the Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritus Federation, the International Spiritus Council, and AMI Brazil. Make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already done so. And if you'd like to check out other channels, other information, please do go to www.spiritus.us. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Write them down, and we will answer them, address them at a later episode. Susanna, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me again here in this program.
Awesome. Susanna, can you tell us a little bit about this notion that everything is in God's time, right? Maybe you can walk us through the idea of human evolution and how we humans, right? You and I and the entire human race perhaps have evolved in how we're able to think, process our mental and emotional states.
Well, let me just start by saying that this is a very fascinating topic that Joanna brings in the book in times of peace and health.
Mhm.
And is the very first chapter of the book where she talks about the evolution of human thinking. And it might feel like kind of dense for people to consider why would I be reading about that? What is the relevance of that? And what drew me towards the study of this particular chapter was the fact that I experienced in my life and in relating with others this very common topic which is human suffering, anguish, and anxiety about their own evolutionary process when it comes to their enlightenment. And a lot of the anguish comes from this sense of rush and the sense that we are lagging behind and that we are not meeting God's expectations of how fast we should be moving.
Mhm.
And so, and a lot of times we feel that we are stuck, that we are not progressing, that we are not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And again, that adds an incredible, painful layer to a life that is already difficult. So, understanding the evolution of human thought, understanding
Mhm.
the time that it took for us to get where we are, and understanding where we are with the perspective of this evolutionary process really changes the way we perceive, we understand, and our perspective in the present moment. And I think it really um, erases or takes away some of this anguish, which is what spiritism does best. It elevates us and gives
Mhm.
us a much broader perspective in life, reframing our perceptions and understanding of the present moment. So I
So
just
let's
want,
go to this, right, Susanna? Let's go to
yeah,
this journey, and I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to just talk about this evolutionary path with the goal for that all of us, you and me, and everybody who's here with us today, to understand. Slow down, right?
right.
Slow down. There's a time for everything. And it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that we need to just sit down and do nothing and
Mm-hmm.
remain distracted. We've become a very distracted society, by the way. But from the perspective of this desire, this calling for all of us to rush toward our sense of enlightenment, of our sense of individuation, of happiness, right? We have time. So go ahead, Susanna. I'm really eager to hear from you.
Yes, yes. And hopefully by the end, and I would love to get back to this, we'll be able to set some smart goals for ourselves, which is, goals that make sense and they are much more in line with our stage of evolution as opposed to goals that are unachievable and anxiety provoking. So if we think about the evolution, right? So we
Mhm.
don't have a full understanding. I think that that's the first thing that I want to say
Mhm.
of the process of evolution. We don't. We have some ideas, but we don't know all the ins and outs. We do know that um, when we are first created,
Mhm.
we were not yet a conscience as we have today, with awareness of the self, for instance, awareness of God. Um, so, in the spiritist philosophy, it is called the intelligent principle. It's like the very beginning. So, this intelligent principle, which I cannot define to you other than it's not material, it is intellectual. It does not die, does not undergo transformations in the way the matter does because it's not material. So,
Mhm.
but this is the beginning of the intelligent life, and this principle will develop itself into as it goes through different stages and different species until the moment that it becomes individualized in the sense that it gains awareness, right? So this evolution process and any evolution process, and this again is just the very basic. So if you were
Mhm.
coming to this for the very first time, never heard of spiritism, none, those who know much, we have to put at least some building blocks to help you
Yes.
to understand. So um, the evolution, whether we're talking about this principle or whether we are talking about the spirit, which is the human spirit, the
Mhm.
evolution happens in both planes of life. When we engage with the material reality and we are disengaged of the material reality. So this explains some leaps, some changes that we cannot find the links in the material realm, but that might be and happen in the spiritual realm. So the
Can I
evolution,
just say
yes.
just one thing, right? So the duality of our spiritual dimension versus our material dimensions is recognized, but if you think in terms of the evolution of human thought, it's also important for us to frame it in the aspect of in our corporeal experience, our incarnation, our life, we are essentially biosocial beings, right? So there is a organic
Mm-hmm.
and a interrelationship component, that social component that also takes a yet another perspective to this discussion. So we have a spiritual material, and within the material, there's the organic
Mm-hmm.
evolutionary process, as well as the social aspect of the gregarious nature of humanity.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. So all
yeah.
those work together synergistically for
Mhm,
the human, for the evolution of this principle, and also for the human evolution.
mhm.
So so going on with that, so there is a moment, as I was saying, where these principle becomes aware of itself, and there's that leap into what we call like the human spirit. Again, um, the evolution is going to take place in between the two realms. Now, once we get to and what this is one of the very beautiful things that Joanna talks
Uh-huh.
about, which is it shows the presence of God within, taking care of us as a loving presence, as this force, this progressive force that it's always within us, this force for evolution. And so this force of love moving us forward and providing us, so we bring from the spiritual reality the instincts, the tendencies, the forces that actually drive the process. So that is one aspect that you know we try to teach people about the presence of God in our days today, but God has always been both outside and within us as this very guiding and loving force propelling us forward. And this is true up to our times today. So, as the intelligent principle, as the spirit evolved, there is a correlation with the evolution of the physical body.
Mm-hmm.
So, the improvement of the the consciousness leads to the improvement of the body as well. In other words, the body becomes more um, specialized. For instance, so you take the human brain. The human brain, from the moment that we stood up on 2 feet, has continued to evolve like very significantly in
Mm-hmm.
response to the evolution of the spirit, the experiences, the challenges, the development of intelligence. So it really correlates. So if you look at, and we're talking about the Homo species, right? So we're talking about the moment that we're standing on 2 feet now, and we're looking at the Homo erectus, the Homo neanderthalis, and all these species that come before our Homo sapiens today.
Mm-hmm.
So we were on 2 feet, but our brain wasn't finished. It continued to develop. So if you look at the very first Homo varieties, right? Their brain, for instance, the frontal lobe was significantly smaller than the
Right.
frontal lobe in our brains today.
Mm-hmm.
So we have evolved. And when we look at this Homo species, we're talking about their appearance perhaps 200,000 years ago, after the entire, like we're talking millions of years of evolution to
Mm-hmm.
get us to this point where the brain itself had a development where we call the triune brain. So we had like initially the development of the brain area that was responsible for the instincts, which is the
Mm-hmm.
very first brain that Joanna will mention, the reptile brain.
Yeah.
So it helps us to survive. And then later on, you have the develop of the mammal brain, which is related to the limbic area and the appearance of the first emotions. All these areas, they are compatible with our level of evolution, and all these areas are necessary for the preparation of the next area. So initially, we are primarily and overwhelmingly instincts. We are here on this planet dealing with a very hostile, unknown world without
Mm-hmm.
being able to make any sense of it, without being able to understand the reality that we
Yeah.
are in. We see things, we have no idea what they are, we have no idea what they are there for, we have no idea how to interact with them. This is us.
This
Very
looks like a horror movie, right? You're
well,
inserted in the middle of a context, and things are coming at you. But we have
yes,
that reptilian brain helping
yes,
us survive, right?
to survive,
Yeah.
right? So at some point, we start to developing some
Mhm.
emotions. Our brain evolves through the observation of this hostile environment. So we start to notice that, hey, some days or sometimes there's light,
Mhm.
sometimes there isn't light. Some days are cold, some days are hot. Sometimes we see someone who's moving, and on the next day, that person might not be moving anymore and not move ever again. And so, what is all that about? So, we start to slowly, by looking at nature, by looking at the animals. Oh, the animals protect themselves. Oh, these thunder struck the tree, and now there's fire. Oh, maybe, and fire's hot, and I'm cold. And
Mhm.
so we spend a long time, right,
Mhm.
making sense of the world outside of us, understanding, for instance, the concept of seasons. There's seasons. There are different times of the year where flowers bloom, where trees don't have any leaves, or where the leaves are falling, and all that kind of stuff. So we go from a what she called the pre-magic
Yeah.
stage of thought evolution, where we could not make any sense of anything around us, to what she is going to call the magic moment.
Yeah.
The magic moment is where, okay, now we're starting to understand things. We're starting to have some emotions. We afraid of things. We start to gather in groups. We start to protect. Then we now understand that there are seasons. We start to develop some tools. We
Mhm.
start to hang around in groups so we can protect ourselves, and we start to build shelters so we can protect ourselves from the environment. But think of this, we are talking about an incredible amount of years and a correlation between the development of the spirit and the development of the brain. A brain that is being developed, in other words, becoming more sophisticated, is increasing its neuronal activities, its
That's right.
connections through these very hardcore experiences.
Mhm.
So this is important because I also, when I think about this and I talk about this and I was reflecting about this as I was studying, the image of a seed came to mind,
Mhm.
right? So the seed is buried into this very cold, dark, hostile environment, and yet the environment that has all the nutrients and the absolutely best circumstances for it to break through the thick um, outside, right?
Mhm.
The skin,
Mhm.
which is thick, but it calls for the hostile environment, and then with the force of God within, it's able to break through and starts to navigate the soil until we reach the surface and breaks through the light. So I like to
And there's
think,
a, yeah, there's a great paradox in itself, right?
yeah,
The protection, and I'm just thinking out loud here, Susanna, but the protection of the survival instincts was the protection of the seed. But once it immerses in the next phase, which is sprouting, it goes into this so-called adverse environment. It's hot, it's cold, and it's dark, and it's da da da. But it's exactly what that plant, in this case, in the metaphor, needs to bloom and become something else. And it's quite beautiful, very lyrical as well. So thanks for sharing that.
no, yeah, and what made me want to say that is because you said, "Well, this sounds so cruel," and
Mhm.
um, but it's actually perfectly loving and divine in the sense that, you know, it's God providing us with the absolutely perfect environment for us to bloom, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
because of the coarse nature of our spirit, it
Mhm.
takes a hostile environment to nurture and to challenge us and to foster those connections at the brain level, at the mind level, that will later allow the
Mhm.
spirit to manifest its potential. In order to manifest thinking, reason, and logic, we also need a brain that is capable of these manifestations. So it's like you can have an
Mm.
outstanding pianist with a
Yeah.
very awful piano.
Mhm.
He will not be able to showcase his
That's right.
talent because
Yeah.
the machine is not compatible. So it's
Yeah,
very
and let me tell you something.
incredible.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I think it's also good in that sense of the timing that it takes for the brain to
Hmm.
develop, like the piano. You need a better piano to be able for that talent to be expressed appropriately. Um, it's not a light switch ever, right? We don't come from very primitive Homo erectus, etc.,
Right.
to Homo sapiens. It takes that time to grow at a physical aspect, but also spiritual. And then when we're ready, then we're ready to become self-aware. And I think
Hmm.
that's what you're talking about, that the brain functions required for this sense of self and
Hmm.
sense of self-awareness, right?
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So there's
Mm-hmm.
a very straight correlation
Mm-hmm.
between the two of them. And so we continue to evolve. So Joanna talks about in this chapter about this pre-magic period where again we could not relate with the outside world to the magic one where things start to make sense and we start to have to act on the external to control the external. We develop tools and
Mm-hmm.
now we start to we now use metal which she says will change the face of the world once we start using metals in our daily lives and we start to exchange and from that point on we make progress we progress to the next phase which she's going to call the egocentric stage. So right here we get into that phase where if I don't get what I want, I will go for it, right? So she talks about being a phase where there is the revival of our very and most aggressive instincts. And this was a phase that was necessary to prepare us for the next phase. So we will learn. It's tough, but it provides consequences that will hopefully take us and teach us to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
This is not working. This is
Mm-hmm.
causing me pain. So maybe there is a different way of doing things. Maybe I should consider a different way of doing things because at the end, it doesn't help for us to be killing one another. We must have a different way of relating. So this is not the final stage, but I just want to open a parenthesis to say that this egocentric stage of thinking seems to me to remain very prevalent in our society today.
I was going to say
So,
exactly that. We feel that the world was created around us, right? That we are at the epicenter of the world, of the universe, and the sun must shine because of me. And it's a very self centered, very
yes.
egocentric view of the world. But some of us, maybe even most of us, right, Susanna, feel that way, that it's all about me.
Yeah, and again, and she's gonna talk a little bit more about instincts and how prevalent
Yeah.
they remain on us.
Mhm.
But yes, so that's a stage of the evolution. So we went to pre-magical, to magical, to the egocentric, and the last stage, which the stage that we are now, it would be the rational stage. So in this stage, we start to make better sense. We are able to reason. We're able to have all the advances that we see in terms of technology, science, all the virtual realities that we are experiencing nowadays. And we have the prolongation of life, for example, the advances of medicine and all that type of stuff. Our life should be less afflictive.
Yeah.
And we have achieved a stage where, and this is a very fascinating idea, where because we have now control over the external world, we not only now understand the external, we are able to manage, we can control, we have power over it. Of course, to some extent, there's some things that some nature, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So the rational thought period is a period where we should be focusing on the proposal of true fraternity and solidarity, as well as we should now be living in such a comfortable uh, way externally, that it's the time to do the same journey that we did inwards,
Yes.
because we don't have any more the concerns and the fears and the challenges with nature. That has been conquered.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you from the comfort of my home. The AC is on, I have light, I have a computer, it's all comfortable. We're settled that way. And so we had to be this way. We had to first travel outwards to develop our thinking ability, to helps us with the sophistication of our brain, so that now we can say, I'm in a safe place, I don't have to worry about being attacked by a lion, whatever. But I can now take the time to do the same, because now the lions, the storms, the fires, the unknown, the darkness is all within.
And it's quite beautiful. It's frightening, right?
Yeah.
It's frightening, but just like the little image of the seed, we have exactly what we need to conquer yet this new stage of development. Absolutely
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes. And we have, again, if you look at the law of progress, and in Kardec, in the Spirit's book, we know that the development of intelligence precedes the moral development, precisely because now we have reached a stage of reason where we can better determine what is good and evil, or in more psychological terms, what is helps us with the flow of life, or what prevents us from moving forward, what hurts and what heals.
Yeah.
And we are able to make more conscious and educated choices for ourselves and for others.
Hmm.
But what Joanna brings up in this chapter, that I feel it's, to me, the absolutely most important concept,
Hmm.
um, that can really help us soothing our anxieties, going back to the very beginning of our conversation. And I did take that sentence out, and I have here, so allow me to read it because it's
Absolutely.
absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic. When she says, after the extremely long passage through the phase of instinctual and conditioned reflexes, the very short time since the attainment of logical thinking has not yet allowed the Homo sapiens to overcome deeply ingrained automatisms in order to act in better ways rather than always react. Their archetypes remain aggressive and defensive, and their behavior is dictated more by the ego than by the self, requiring ongoing effort to overcome their uh, inferior inclinations. So I think that this is really important for us to reflect in terms of our evolution because we get fooled by the intellectual advances. We get, um, yeah. So we look at the world outside and we think we are so civilized, we are so advanced. Yes, we are. Intellectually, we have done an incredible, great job. But Joanna highlights in the text that it's been only 10,000 years
Yeah.
out of the 200,000 or even more that we have been up on 2 feet and looking more or less like we look today, only the last 10,000 years that we have really achieved a level of reasoning and thinking that we are today. And here she's highlighting the fact that, you know, an extremely long passage through the instinct and the condition reflex, a very short time since we attain this highest level of thinking. So these instincts are very, very ingrained on us. So the idea, Marcia, is that every day when we get up and we go out to live and
Hmm.
to relate, we're
Yeah.
taking our uh, weapons with us. We
Yes.
are going out into society within our armors. We have our shield. We are constant. We remain somewhat in this survival mode,
Yes.
which if it's not because we think we're going to be trespassed by a sword, it is because we feel threatened emotionally.
It's almost like
Because
very tribal, right? If you think about in the history of relatively recent history of mankind, it's very tribal. I'm a warrior, and I'm
yes,
here to protect my tribe, my clan, my family. But that puts me in a position to always look in fear for any external stimuli that may disrupt my family.
yeah,
Whereas what you're saying is that it's gone. The time is gone. We don't need that. We can just relax and invert our investment of discovery, of even warrior like type of activities inside of us. Does
but
this make sense?
but
Yes. Yes.
but
Right.
this needs to be taken
Mhm.
within God's time. And here's where I
Yes.
want to say it.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is the whole point of this conversation. It
Hmm.
took millions of years to
Yes.
get us to where we are. It's insane to expect that it will take one incarnation, two
Yeah.
incarnations for us to overcome this, which Juan is telling us with all letters and words.
Hmm.
We are still in a reactive stage. So our reason and our thinking has not been trained yet enough to override the instincts because this is really what characterizes humanity. What makes us humans is the ability to, using rational thinking, to
Hmm.
analyze the situation and say, my my body tells me that this is a threat because someone disagree with me and now my heart rate is going up. My body, the animal in me is feeling a threat. But I understand that the fact that someone thinks
Hmm.
differently than me doesn't make that person my enemy, doesn't make
Absolutely.
me inferior. My life, my emotional life is not threatened. Therefore, I am going to breathe. I am going to calm down my central nervous system. And
Mhm.
instead of reacting to this, I am going to say something in line with my humanity and not in line with the reptile that remains within me.
Yeah, there's
So,
a book, Suzanne. I don't know if you read. It's it's by a psychologist and
mhm,
economist, Daniel Kahneman, uh, Thinking Fast and Slow, that addresses that in a way, very data centered type of discussions on how we still are thinking in the fast mode.
mhm,
In the
right,
fast mode is that instinctive type of brain function that we need to survive. And
right,
he
right.
invites us also to slow down and to embrace the slow thinking, which is what you're talking about from Joanna de Angelis, right?
Right. So look, we are now in a
Mhm.
time where science is catching up with this.
Absolutely.
So we're looking at, works like this. We look at the whole paradigm of mindfulness.
Yeah.
It's related to that, right? There is many trends in spirituality that, if you look at the practice of yoga, I mean, there are many ways in which the spiritual realm is telling us, not
Yes.
only through spiritism, but through all religions and spiritual in many different ways. Sometimes things have different names, but the essence of the teaching is the same. It's like if the spiritual world is telling us, okay, let me give you tools so that you guys can start practicing being human.
I love
Um,
I love it. Let's
yes,
at last be human, right?
let's be humans, right? So we have this incredible anxiety of being good, of being perfect, of being pure. Forget about all that. Going back to the SMART goals. So this is it. It took millions of years for us to get here, right? It's been only 10,000 years since we start actually using our brains in more efficient ways. This one is telling us that
Mhm.
those instincts are still deeply ingrained in us. So when you look at this reality now, you can say to yourself, what is the goal that I want to set for my incarnation?
Yeah.
Right? What is achievable? Because smart goals are achievable. If you set for yourself a goal that you cannot achieve, you will get into depression and
Yes.
anxiety, and you're going to take medication. You don't need to. You don't
I
need
love
to.
it. I love it.
Just understand that it is like that. It is slow because real changes take time, and you need to, for the seed, for the plant, before the plant breaks the soil in a more upright movement towards the light. It spent a long time expanding the roots under the ground in parallel,
Yeah.
in horizontal ways. So this is it. And one important aspect that Kardec will talk about, and I kind of like to make the connection with what Juan is saying here,
Mhm.
because she's going to say that she ends that statement saying that's going to take ongoing effort to overcome the inferior inclinations. And
Yeah.
so when Kardec talks to us about, for example, what is a true spiritist, she's going to say the spirits are recognized by moral transformation in the efforts to overcome the evil inclinations. But what is interesting about this is that when you look at the French work of the Spirit's book, and even the Brazilian translation, the
Mhm.
word used is not overcome. The word used is tame.
Yes.
Now, tame and overcome are two different things. Yes, taming can lead to overcoming eventually, but taming means that you have an instinct, a wild instinct, that you are training so that instinct does not manifest in that wild way. But
It's
the
almost
instinct,
like a Zen Buddhist view of that wildness that exists in us, right, Susanna?
yeah, but the
Mhm.
but something tame
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it disappear. It means that it's under control,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas when you talk about overcoming, you're talking about winning. So it will come a point. So when Jesus, for instance, right, when Jesus is um, attacked or whatever, was he taming his tendency to hurt back, or he had already overcome that?
I see.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe in being a physical body, we don't, I'm speculating here, he might had physiological responses but no tendency, no inclination whatsoever, ever in thought or in any other way to retaliate. It was completely overcome because for you to have that tendency, you have to have fear and you have to feel threatened in
Yeah.
first place. If
Yeah.
you don't have fear and you don't have a sense of being threat, you will not react to that,
Yeah.
right? So I think that that's really interesting
Yeah.
because in terms of evolution, this is where we are. We are taming, right? So I feel that I try to do that very consciously in my life. Whenever I feel my heart racing, whenever I feel my muscles tighten up, whenever I feel that my central nervous system has gotten into that flight and fight mode, I say, okay, here's an opportunity. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. Sometimes it's faster than me, right? Boom, I go and I react. But I try, stop, breathe, think,
Yes.
and act,
Yes.
right? So that's the place where we have a understand you having all these feelings. You're angry, you are, distressed. Where's
Hmm.
that coming from? How are you feeling? What is underneath, right? Are you feeling diminished? Are you feeling, why are you so upset? What is that
Hmm.
telling you about you? And then be able to come up with an action that does not compromise my life even more, does not create more problems. So this is kind of one of the goals. Can we live this lifetime, if not significantly better, a little better? That's great. Can we start kind of balancing out our spiritual account so that we are kind of moving towards a positive um, balance and not creating more negative, not withdrawing more and more and more, right? So making
Hmm.
some small deposits of kindness and altruistic actions that can help us to have a healthier balance account in the infinite.
I love it. The thought that came to my mind, and I know we're coming to the end, and I
Yeah.
love the SMART goals, right? Is it achievable? Yes, we can achieve that. But what comes to my mind, crazy as it is, Susanna, is that instead of flipping into living 100% or 90% of our energy in that very reactive, very primitive reptilian brain, if we can maybe start to think about it as, I don't know, let's spend 60% of our energy in the neocortex, right? The rational brain, maybe 40%, not 40, 30% in our emotional mammalian brain. And there's room for that 10% left, which is the reptilian, the reactive, instinctive brain, because we may go through some times where we are going to be vulnerable to attacks or whatever,
Yeah.
but start to flip the coin. Let's understand there's time for that. We, like you said, we don't live anymore in the sub-Sahara savannah with lionesses coming
Right.
at us,
Yeah.
hunting us. No, this is gone. This is past. We have time to really be the best that we can be in our own humanness.
But at the same hand, like I said, I think we live in a world that is still not safe,
Hmm.
and it's not going to be safe until we move out of this kind of selfish, self-centered mode that we live in.
Yes.
That's on Kardec in the book. posthumous work. There's a
Mhm.
beautiful dissertation about how selfishness will never allow us to feel safe,
Yeah.
because we're always competing and we're always in a defensive mode.
Mhm.
So there are times where like the instincts are necessary, and even in the times where we already have the possibility to override it, but we don't. We shouldn't feel horrible. we shouldn't. We shouldn't
Yeah.
nail us to a cross and
Yeah.
and punish ourselves, because it's important to recognize that that's very much our nature.
Yeah.
So, but the fact that it's our nature doesn't mean that is our destination. That's not, the reality that will have to be. So it's a balance between consciousness and kindness.
Love
Um,
it. Love it. Yeah.
yeah, consciousness, kindness, and commitment, I would say. So
Mhm.
you're conscious, you're kind to yourself, and most important, you're committed to the process. You don't give up.
Mhm.
You keep going, and you can make very simple goals, such as say, "Let me observe my day today. Let's see if within my day and the difficult situations I will face today, I can one time in my day." Bring that awareness and actually make a conscious choice for myself. That's simple. That is achievable. That's one day at a time. That is within, it matches our level of evolution. It's a kind goal. It's achievable. It's generous and it's loving. So that's I think what Joanna tries to tell us.
Yes, I love it. Using a corporative language, let's use that as our SMART goal for today, for
Yes.
the year, for the life. And Susanna, we are at time, unfortunately, but I just want to say thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation today. I really enjoyed you using the words from the book by Joanna de Angelis to give this this broad brush strokes about human evolution, and the invitation for all of us to read those books, to familiarize, but most importantly, be kind, be generous, be committed.
Mhm.
With that, I'll see you next time. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.